Hi y'all, I'm Joaquin Castro and I proudly represent the 20th Congressional District of Texas. I want to thank LULAC for inviting me to participate in their panel, The State of Latinos in Education, Expanding Opportunities for All. Like so many folks, education was the key to my own success. What I learned in the classroom bled into the real world, pushing me outside my comfort zone and widening my perspective of the challenges we face on the road to success. For all Americans, and especially Latinos, who are the youngest and fastest growing population in the United States, access to a good education is a key part of the infrastructure of opportunity that helps us chase our American dreams. From pre-K to higher education, every student, regardless of where they live or where they come from, deserves a world-class education. That's why, as a proud father and as a determined legislator, I work hard to make sure that Latino students have the support they need to become the leaders of tomorrow. I've made access to and support for these institutions central to my advocacy and my legislative work. In Congress, I've successfully fought to increase the yearly appropriated funding for Hispanic serving institutions, giving schools the financial support to assist students in need. I've authored and introduced the Hispanic Educational Resources and Empowerment Act, which would create a new grant program to support partnerships and collaboration between HSIs and school districts that predominantly educate Hispanic students. I also have a bill called the Advanced Coursework Equity Act, which would establish an $800 million grant program to help school districts increase the enrollment and performance of underrepresented students in advanced classes. And I strongly supported the passage of bills like the Future Act, which permanently provides minority-serving institutions with the $225 million they need to sustain critical programs and services over the next 10 years. Through our continued legislative efforts, we can prepare and empower students across the nation. And as we continue to recover from the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, I urge the Biden administration to provide relief for student loan borrowers. We must extend the pause on loan repayment plans and cancel at least $50,000 in student loan debt per borrower. We cannot expect Americans to pursue higher education and then leave them with crushing debt. With your advocacy, we can provide the funding and resources to support our communities and give children the opportunity to unlock their full potential. The future of our nation, the future of our youth, depends on what we do today. Thank you for all of your hard work to advance educational opportunities. And I look forward to continuing my work with LULAC, my colleagues in Congress, to deliver for Latinos and for all Americans.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Montserrat Garibay, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Labor Relations here at the Office of the Secretary at the Department of Education. It is a pleasure and an honor to be with you all this afternoon, and we have an amazing panel of panelists this afternoon, and we have Melody Gonzales. She's the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Hispanics. We have Dr. Nancy Vera. She's the President of Corpus Christi, the American Federation of Teachers. We also have Dr. Ana Gil Garcia. She's the Vice Chair for the LULAC National Education Committee. And we have Dr. Theresa Montaño. She's the co-chair of the LULAC National Higher Education Committee. So as you can see, we have a panel of amazing Latinas who are going to share with us their thoughts and also the wonderful work that they are doing for our Latino students. So we're gonna go ahead and start. And if you can please introduce yourself, but the question is, what do you see the most pressing issue for the Latino students in your own roles? And we're gonna go ahead and start with Dr. Theresa Montaño.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I am a professor of Chicano and Chicano Studies at Cal State Northridge and have the privilege of co-chairing with Dr. Angela Valenzuela, LULAC's Higher Education Committee. First of all, I think as we collectively engage in conversations about advancing equity and justice in education, that we have to recognize that at least in higher education, and I would argue even in K-12, that Chicano Latino students are driving the enrollment everywhere, in every system from community college to Research One universities. Yet, from enrollment to graduation, we continue to use this majoritarian lens to drive our campus programming and our curricular development and student services. And although there's been a decrease in the number of Hispanic serving institutions due to the pandemic, there is still a need to focus on the student community and the institution collectively. I would argue that some of the issues that we're confronting are issues like student debt, housing and food insecurity for many of our students, the digital divide. I've had students who meet in the parking lot so that they can take their online courses, pay equity and promotion for Latino staff and faculty. And then, of course, that never-ending dilemma that we have of adjunct faculty as opposed to strong job security for our higher education faculty. Many of those are Latinos who have not been able to transition into full-time positions, and that really impacts our students. So I would say that those are some of the issues that we're facing, and I would argue that if for Latino faculty and communities, that requires taking a Latinx lens to addressing some of those issues.
Thank you, Dr. Theresa. Now we have Dr. Nancy Vera.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Monse. I'm Dr. Nancy Vera. I'm the proud president of the Corpus Christi American Federation of Teachers in Texas, and I'm also a longtime member of the League of United Latin American Citizens. So, hola, hermanos y hermanas. I think that as a teacher, I've been a teacher for about 35 years, and we saw so much suffering of our children, especially Latino children, during the COVID pandemic, that our children right now are struggling to catch up with everything that's going on in our schools right now in terms of being present in the classroom. How have they socially developed? And what can we do to help them develop a little bit more socially, since they're really behind socially for 2 years. And I think that's all our children, not just our Latino children, but disproportionately, Latino students had the highest incidence of COVID, at least here in Texas. And so that's one of the challenges that we have coming up in these next 2 years. So how are we going to address that? Well, we know that billions of dollars were were supposed to be given to our students with the American Rescue Plan. And we have to make certain that those monies are going to schools that house our children of color, especially our Latino children. Additionally, we find, at least here in Texas, and I'm sure across the nation, that we suffer from a lack of counselors and social workers in our schools. In the Corpus Christi Independent School District, for example, we don't have any social workers, and that has hurt our children tremendously, especially coming back in person from virtual learning, if they were at all able to do virtual learning, because as Dr. Montaño said, they lack the resources, the technical computers, the all of that, to be able to keep up with the other students who have access to those resources. And the next thing I'd like to address is that of standardized testing. Standardized testing, at least in Texas, is the be-all, end-all in education. And that can't be. The standardized tests do not reflect the community, the Latino community at all. And because of that, and we're gearing up for these standardized tests when we should be meeting the needs of the children. We should be meeting the needs in terms of education, reading and writing, and not standardized tests that we cannot relate to, at least our students cannot relate to. And finally, we need our students to learn more about our Latino heritage. For God's sakes, we need them to learn about Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta. We need to have them learn about LULAC and the heroes in LULAC, and of course, the American GI Form. Corpus Christi has a rich history of civil rights, especially Latino civil rights. And it was sad for me, because we're doing a program with future teachers, when I asked them, when I was trying to explain what a union was, I asked them, okay, has anyone heard of Cesar Chavez? Out of the 25 students in that room, and they were all Latinos and Latinas, not one of them raised their hand. So in order to teach, we have to also be responsible. So in order to teach our children about Latino history, we have to teach our teachers in the teacher programs about our heroes and what we did in order to help this country rise. Thank you, Montserrat.
Thank you, Nancy. So good to see you. Next, we have Dr. Ana Gil Garcia.
Okay, I'm going to unmute myself. Hi, good afternoon. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me to be with these great Latinas. And definitely, you know, this is a great conversation and I have to say that whatever was said before, I have to agree with all of them because, you know, Theresa Montaño, you know, just made great points and Nancy the same. But as my role right now, you know, I'm the National Vice Chair of LULAC Education Committee. And I see two pressing issues that has been already mentioned, but I like to add some information in there. So the first one is the Latino educator representation. And the second one is the enrollment decline at all levels of education. And I like to say that, you know, we all think about the Latinos being represented, you know, and being sitting at the table all the time, but really we know that that's not true. So the Latino students continue being impacted by the lack of Latino faculty, by the lack of Latino teachers, by the lack of school leaders representation across the educational system in the United States. Beyond the language barriers, the Latinx teachers help bridge our culture-specific pedagogies that go unappreciated when the teaching population is not diverse, and we all know that. The discussion of lack of representation has been elevated to the national level by different entities, and LULAC has also been voicing that, you know, for many years. However, the issue has been framed on the teacher shortage, but not has been framed on the teacher preparation and college recruitment, college enrollment, retention, and graduation. Teacher preparation isn't affordable. If we all want really our kid to be very well prepared by a teacher, you know, teaching has to be an affordable career. The cost of teacher preparation anywhere, you know, deters potential teachers of color from entering the profession. Lack of affordability damages our Latino students in inequitable ways. The students of colors, we all know, are disproportionately affected by teachers' shortages. I have to say there is one senator here in Illinois, and I'm in Chicago, by the way, and she doesn't want to talk about teachers' shortages because she said that there is a teacher vacancy. That's what she mentioned, and which I think I have kind of agreed with her. So the investment in teacher scholarship, for example, has decreased over time. And of course, you know, when you decrease those opportunities, then the number of new teachers supported by them will also decline. So, but I have to say that looking into some initiative coming from some state levels, you know, we're looking into waiving short-term substitute teaching license fees. We're also looking into making some qualified college students eligible to be substitute teachers. There are some bills that are calling right now for tuition reimbursement for eligible public school teachers. But what it's telling us is that every child deserves to be in classrooms led by teachers who reflect their diverse identities and experiences. And there is no question about that. My second point, which is the decline of enrollment at all levels of education, K through 21, very recently, the Department of Education, particularly the National Center for Education and Statistics, talk about the public school enrollment in 2021 fell by 3% compared to the previous year. So marking the largest decline since the start of this century. And that's something that we need to think about. The declines were mostly concentrated in pre-K, 22%, and kindergarten at 9%. So other grade groupings like, from show decrease as well. So we have, for example, the A through 8, there was a 3% decline. So the state of California is reporting right now that they are projecting that K through 12 student enrollment will drop 9% by 2030. That is also true in New York City, public schools. We have to remember that this past October, there was 38,000 students that dropped from the New York City system. And that is also true in Chicago, which is a very large system of education. So in Chicago, the community organizations, different agencies, they came together last summer to start calling students one by one, those that left the system, just to make them aware that the schools were going to open again and see if they can really be back, in the classrooms. But one of the things that really worries me is that we all know that there are many reasons for drop in enrollment. And we have discussed that for years. And we talk about the declining birth rates. We talk about the immediate availability of jobs. We talk about, the greater public skepticism about, the value of higher education. But when we examine the long-term effect, and that's really what I like to say, is that, it is clear that if we have a very low number of professionals, that will slow economic growth. We also can expect that continued labor shortages. We also can expect a lower life expectancy, higher levels of divorce, and more demand for social services, but less tax revenue to pay for it. So the situation in relationship with the Hispanic community is extremely concerning. The number of Hispanic students in community colleges decreased by 13.7% in 2021. That is very sad because that definitely is telling us that our community was disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And I'm going to leave it right here because I know that that we have many more information coming up and then a great discussion. Thank you.
I think the points that you made are extremely important, and we see that throughout the nation. Okay, we have Melody next.
Everybody, I'm Melody Gonzales. I am proud to work with Montserrat Garibay at the U.S. Department of Education as a presidential appointee in the Biden-Harris administration. I'm about 3 months in now as executive director of the White House Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Hispanics. This is an office that the president reinstituted and actually expanded the scope of. Before it used to be called the White House Hispanic Initiative on Educational Excellence for Hispanics. And now equity and economic opportunity are specifically tied into the work that we are asked to do through executive order. And so I'm really honored to be able to serve in this role on behalf of the Latino community and to be with you all here today. At the White House Initiative, there is an executive order creating our office, so I'd encourage you all to take a look at it if you are interested. We've identified 12 policy goals that are cradle to career priorities for us to be working on, not only within the Department of Education, but with our partners across all of the federal agencies and outside with leaders and communities like you all. And with this work, there's a lot of progress that we've been able to see. Since President Biden stepped into office, we went from having 2 million people with vaccines for COVID-19 to over 200 million shots in arms now. where went from school buildings being closed to now having almost all of them back up and open. So students are learning with their caring teachers and their peers, where we know they enjoy and thrive best. Some of the other big updates I want to make sure you all are aware of is that 130 billion was spent and invested in safely reopening the school buildings. And that's not only around the health and safety precautions for school infrastructure, but also to allow states, localities, and districts to be able to provide social and emotional supports and equity work that supports our Latino students. Families were able to benefit with receiving tax credits that gave families with children $3,600 for each child under 18. Over 16 billion has been canceled in student debt. So over 680,000 people now have their loans relieved. We've also been able to give over 5 billion in public service loan relief to over 70,000 people working in public sector jobs. That includes people like doctors, educators, nurses, veterans, service members, and others. We've been able to get 10 billion in American Rescue Plan funds to Hispanic serving institutions, also a lot of grants to HSIs, relief to Puerto Rico to the tune of $6.7 billion. Also focus on 3 billion to support children with disabilities. There's a lot of funding that's being invested under this administration to our states and local communities to really address equity issues that we know existed even long before the pandemic. And so as I think about this question of what's the one most important thing that we need to do to support our Latino students, I would argue that in addition to everything that's already been stated, which is great, it's growing the representation of Latinos in education and in the federal government. Right now, we know that Latino students have been about 27% of the K-12 student population. Pre-COVID, before some of these numbers started to dip, Latinos were about 20% of college students. But as a community, we're only 10% or less than 10% of educators, principals, faculty, college presidents, federal workers. And actually, when it comes to college presidents, I think the last statistic showed Latinos were just 3% of college presidents. We need to make sure that we have seats at the table because there are historic policies and funding mechanisms that are impacting our community. And if we are not growing our representation, we're not having that opportunity to really influence change, and it makes such a difference. I look up to and admire the work of our secretary, Miguel Cardona, and through his leadership, he's emphasizing equity in all of the priority work that we're doing, whether it's supporting students through the pandemic response or making higher ed more inclusive and affordable, helping make sure that education's leading to career pathways where people can thrive. He's instituting through our budget a lot of these equity priorities as well. And what a difference that makes to have leaders heading our agencies and also working within them to make sure that we're using these funds for issues like promoting equity in terms of students' access to their education, creating a more diverse teacher and educator workforce, supporting mental, social, and emotional needs for students as well as educators and families. And so I would urge everybody listening here today to think about how you can join us in this mission of growing Latino representation in the education and teaching profession, in the federal government. And on the federal front, I would just encourage people to know that, of course, you can apply for career jobs. There are actually historic and urgent hiring opportunities all around the country right now, and you can find them at usajobs.gov. That includes paid internship opportunities with a number of agencies. Just recently, President Biden signed a bill that's going to provide $4.5 million for paid White House internships. That's never happened before, and that's going to make it more accessible for those in our community that may also have less means to be able to take on these prestigious internships. And of course, there are presidential appointments. And so I encourage you all, whether you're interested in full-time appointments like those that Montserrat and I have, or sometimes there are also boards and commissions, you can apply, put your name in the hat at whitehouse.gov.
Thank you, Melody. Great information. So, y'all have brought up so many important points, right? When we talk about pressing issues that are impacting our Latino community is, as y'all were saying, the Latino under-enrollment in different areas, the student debt, the digital divide that we're seeing. I thought somebody mentioned about the food scarcity that we have, which is a big one as well. The lack of educators and people that look like you and me in different levels, school board, community colleges, state, etc. And those are things that we're seeing every single day. In terms of the work that you do every single day, there are certain things that y'all are doing and y'all see every time, every day, that many times they don't receive the national attention that needs it, right? We're so busy doing the work that needs to get done that we sometimes forget to share. And I think that's something that is really important. So in the work that you do now, what has worked in your area that, again, hasn't received national attention that you would like to share with us in terms of education? If you could explain to us and share a little bit with us. As a teacher, I always say, sharing is caring, right? And the more that we share this, the better, because then we can multiply and we don't have to start things from scratch. We can share those things and we can amplify them and learn more about it. And through workshops like this, we get to share those ideas and hopefully grow those ideas. So I will start again with Dr. Theresa Montaño.
I want to address what I'm doing. One of the things I forgot to mention is the climate that we're all negotiating as we're implementing these changes, right? The pushback on critical race theory, which for us essentially says you cannot discuss issues of race and racism as you move forward your educational justice projects. Issues facing our undocumented students, I forgot to mention that, and that is a critical issue for us in higher education. And so some of the things that we are doing is establishing dream centers in our institutions of higher education that not only are there to help deal with the trauma that our students face, but also legal issues for them and their families. And the other is, I want to address two things that people raised and two projects that we're currently working on. One is the educational shortage of teachers who look like us. In California, we have been lucky enough to have a legislature that has made ethnic studies a requirement for every graduating student K through university. And what we have found is that there is often confusion of what it means to be a multiculturalist, culturally responsive teacher, and actually be an ethnic studies specialist. And so we're finding that many of our teachers are not prepared to teach these courses. So we're going to be implementing ethnic studies statewide for every student in K-12 and every community college and every CSU. But there is a lack of folks who have that content area. So one of the things that we're doing is we're having an initiative to address the teacher shortage that does a number of things. One, combines the need to have teachers who are bilingual or multilingual, and more than just Spanish and English, but including some of the indigenous languages in our surrounding community, which happen to be Mixtec, Quechua, and Zapotec, along with ethnic studies. So really trying to not just address a language need, but also a content need. The other is the issue of high-stakes testing, even in teacher ed. So as we sit here today, 3 states, California, New Jersey, and I believe Washington has already done away with the Ed TPA, right, or the form of high-stakes testing that the Ed TPA has become. Not a question of measuring the performance of assessment of our teachers coming up. We do want them to be competent, but we don't need for it to be a high-stakes measure. And then the third is developing a policy agenda for Hispanic serving institutions that truly make them Hispanic serving institutions. 22 out of 23 CSUs are Hispanic serving institutions. That soon, hopefully, San Luis Obispo will join that number. But very few of those institutions can call themselves Hispanic serving. They're Hispanic enrolling institutions, right? we often see that those faculty who are usually the ones that are working with our students of color are not parts of some of the grants that are funded on a federal level, but they are the ones that are overworked. And so we're looking at issues of cultural taxation where it comes to faculty of color who work overtime because you're teaching and you don't want to turn away any student who needs your help. So you're actually teaching, counseling, because there's not enough counselors. And the fourth is making sure that those who are running for office or seeking appointments in office truly have the interests of Latino students in mind. We represent 55% of the students in California, right? In some districts, more than 90%. Yet superintendents and school boards are not often asked questions about what are you going to do for this Latino majority. So we're working with a group called the Latino Equity Initiative based right now in Los Angeles to make sure that our elected officials sign the Latino Policy Initiative, pledging their support for issues related to Chicano Latinos, not just in education, but in the community. So those are 4 initiatives that we don't think have gotten enough public interest, but are really critically important to moving our agenda forward.
I think, yeah, ditto to everything that you said. The more that we share those examples, the better, so we can uplift our community, and so they can have better opportunities as well. Thank you. Nancy, would you like to go next?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Montserrat. First of all, I'd like to reiterate, I think it was what Dr. Garcia and Dr. Montaño said about the fact that we have many immigrant students that are not being serviced. And some of them may be what we're calling now irregular, not that they're not regular, but the fact is that that's what we call them in South Texas, are the people who are crossing over, who don't have the documentation that they need in order to be full out citizens. So we're working very strongly and intensely with the South Texas Human Rights Center. And the South Texas Human Rights Center provides water for those crossing the border and in our Wild Horse Desert so that they don't die of thirst. Many times we find the bodies and you can tell where the animals have eaten at their eyes, and they have a rosary in one hand and a phone in the other. And that's children, mind you. We have children out there. Just this last week, we went out there with a group of people from the American Federation of Teachers, and we found children's clothing and baby shoes. And those are the students who are crossing over that we have to educate. So how are we providing those services to those students? And how are we teaching our teachers about that? I think that that's where we're lacking. And perhaps the immigrant parents are so afraid that they won't send their child or their children to school. That's a big concern for us. I think that also, when we're talking about students who are immigrants, are we as schools providing what they need in order to be successful? Are we providing their parents or maybe their grandparents or maybe whomever is taking care of them, because we don't know, with the resources that they need? I know in the American Federation of Teachers, one of the things that we do, of course, is with the community. We'll work with the consulates, at least here in Corpus Christi, of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Mexico, and we work with them. They provide the documentation, the identity IDs for the immigrants, and then through and this was partly Montserrat's idea when she was working with the Texas AFL-CIO citizenship classes in Texas, so that we give folks the opportunity to become citizens in Texas and of course the United States. And that's all very important work so that they can feel more comfortable in sending their children to school. One of the things that we're doing at a school that has a high immigrant population in Corpus Christi, and believe me, we're talking about 90 to 95%, is Zavala Elementary School. We do in American Federation of Teachers what is called community schools across the nation. And what we do is we provide those community schools with wraparound services. That is, if they need some medical attention or mental attention or whatever it is that they need, we provide those community services. Zavala is our prime school right now. And of course, citizenship classes for the parents who need to become citizens. So that's what we're doing. And we, of course, provide them food assistance, enrichment. We provide them books. Zavala alone has received at least, and it's a small school, but we've given the children and there's about 300 children in that school, about 2,000 books so that they can start their libraries at home, and they're bilingual books too, at home, and for the teachers to use as resources in the classroom. The other thing that I'd like to point out, if I could, Ms. Garibay, is that we are also established in Texas the first wellness room in Corpus Christi. That is, coming back from the pandemic, we see a lot of teachers dropping out of education. In Corpus Christi alone, we've guesstimated that we have at least 425 vacancies out of a school district of 35,000 children. That means that teachers are leaving in droves, as we know, across the nation. So what can we do to alleviate some of the stress and the hard work that the teachers are doing, because they're being expected to do more and more and more with these programs that are coming, I don't know from where, thinking that our students are going to do better on these high stakes tests. And that's not happening. So what we did was we established, thanks to a grant by the American Federation of Teachers, a wellness room for teachers. And this wellness room has approximately 4 massage chairs. And Montserrat, when you come to Corpus Christi, you've got to try one of them, because they massage your head, your arms, your fingers, your legs, your feet, everything. And you can hear music channeling through the massage chairs. In addition to a beautiful ambiance at the school, it's a wellness room. The ambiance is the lights, the music, the diffusers of lavender, so that the teachers can relax when they have time. Not only the teachers, but all personnel, because everyone makes up the school. So additionally, we are, of course, nurturing future teachers. And that is, we have partnered, and the partnerships are so important with the university here. And we, of course, have approximately 60 students that we have are working with on wellness and self-care. And we think that's extremely important right now because of the added pressures that we have as educators. So we're very proud of that. And of course, there's much more I can say, but I'm going to cut it right there. Thank you, Montserrat.
No, thank you, Nancy. And thank you for all the work that the American Federation of Teachers is doing for teachers and the community. Next, we have Dr. Ana Gil Garcia.
You know, when I read the question about what has worked in your area, of course, when I see myself that we are a national committee, is kind of just looking into, you know, what is going on at the national level, right? You know, in terms of, you know, LULAC activities and a LULAC immersion in the different issues in the community. I have to say that, you know, our committee, the Education Committee, the National Education Committee, we've been launching effort to connect and have direct communication channel with the state LULAC education representative to ensure that information, resources, and advocacy is expanded, particularly to combat misinformation and sometimes confusion whether they are deliberate or not, in terms of critical race theory, in terms of, you know, some other issues that has been, the community has been misinformed. So another thing that we are doing is, you know, just making sure that the LULAC, the National Education Committee, we are building, you know, coalitions with state and national organizations on issues such as the path to learning recovery for Black and Brown students, you know, the early childhood education for all. You know, in the state of Illinois, for example, we make sure that LULAC is at the table in discussions regarding the $350 million for evidence-based funding. So we are part of the Funding Illinois Future Coalition. We also are part of the $4.2 million that, the discussion for the minority teachers of Illinois scholarship. The governor, he offered 2.3 and we said no, 4.1, 4.2. So, we're in that negotiation. And then we are also we're members of the $122 million for MAP, for the Minority Award program. And because we're a member of a coalition that was formed recently that is called Coalition for Transforming Higher Education Funding. One of the things that we have done as well is just making sure that we have that we are participating in the digital, what we call the digital literacy programs. That is, we call it digital democratization, by the way, because we have one of the branches of one of the LULAC Council, Council 5238. There is an organization that we've been working with that is called the Digital Latino Leaders Network. And so they have an extensive program in many school districts right now, and LULAC is in the front, with that, with participating with a grant. Another thing that we are doing is, the participation on writing computer education national standards. That's definitely is a high need because we see that we talk about the needs in the schools, but digital knowledge, remote learning, and all of those issues. But we really need to attack the fact that we don't have the teachers' preparation in computer education, and that's really something that. And of course, we have we in this the coalition building. We have incorporated, we have worked with Advance Illinois, we have worked with Rotary clubs, we are working with immigrant organizations. And there is one thing that in Illinois, we received a grant to work with retraining, re-educating Latinas that lost their businesses. So it's what we call, the Latina entrepreneurship program. So that's one thing that we've been doing in Illinois. And of course, there could be more things to talk about because I think our team at the national level, we also have, many programs that we've been participating and collaborating with some other states.
Next, we have Melody.
There are so many programs that I want to make sure LULACers and the listening audience hear about, but also that you take out even broader into the community. One of the pieces of good work that we are rolling out is hot off the press, is we're rolling out a series of White House Latino Economic Summits all around the country in person. We can't get everywhere, but we're going to be in person to the extent that we can in a number of different states, and also trying to provide some of this content online so that our community can really understand, the benefits of the American Rescue Plan, all of those millions and billions of dollars I rattled through earlier, the Transportation and Infrastructure Bill, which is providing a lot of real-time opportunity, and especially in terms of jobs that could benefit our community, a number of actions that our federal agencies are taking, and really better understand how they can influence policies, programs, and funding that the federal government has to offer and be part of accessing and tapping those benefits. So we're going to be rolling those out in San Antonio, Denver, and a few other cities. So please, if you want to follow along and join us in one of those, if it is in a city that you are near, ed.gov/Hispanic Initiative is where we'll continue to be posting information on those summits. We're really bringing in a lot of senior officials from the federal agencies in DC, but also uplifting career staff that are working on the ground all across the country and communities at the local level. Another really exciting piece of work that's linked to our White House Hispanic Initiative is that as part of our executive order, we'll get to work with every agency in developing action plans around the implementation of the executive order. This means we're creating a template all of the agencies are going to have to report in on in terms of what they're doing to empower and support the Latino community in terms of education, equity, and economic opportunity, whether it's through their programs, grants, regulations, outreach efforts, internal hiring or contracting, grants to HSIs. And so I'm really excited about how we can leverage that action plan as a management tool to really help bolster that bridge that exists between federal agencies and our community. One of the things that is a program available in the federal government that I'd love to see more in our community take advantage of and tap into is called the IPA. It stands for the Intergovernment Personnel Act. And basically, if you are working at a state, local, or tribal government, a higher education institution, or a nonprofit, a certain number of sectors, you can actually work out an agreement with federal agencies like mine and be able to basically detail in and help work at the agency for a certain period of months. This is something I would love to really try to build on, of course, within our Hispanic initiative to bolster our capacity, but it can happen across all of the different federal agencies. In some cases, whether it's in DC or in some cases it might be on the ground in local communities. That IPA is something that I think more in our community should really be tapping into. I also think, there's just, again, like I mentioned earlier, there's just a historic volume of funding that is being pushed out from the federal government. And so I'd encourage you all to make sure you know that at our website, ed.gov, every state has to upload its plans for how they're going to use the American Rescue Plans. And so as advocates, you all can be taking a look at our Department of Education website to see what states are reporting in to us on. You can be engaging at your local level and with your schools and districts as well to see how those funds are being used and help advocate for them to make sure they're supporting Latino students, English language learners, immigrant students, and others that are in need of extra support. I also think we have to do more in our community talking about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. So if people are working in public service jobs and they've been working for 10 years, they've been paying off their loans, they're eligible to apply to have their loans wiped out. And people are crying tears of joy literally every day on social media because we've been able to, through our Secretary's leadership and in this administration, put a PSLF waiver program in place. And that means if people apply before October 31st, they can apply to get their public service student loans forgiven, even if they've had issues or technical difficulties because of the process in the past. And so I want to make sure that our Latino teachers, educators, frontline workers, all of those that are in the public service jobs that are eligible are signing up for this program. The website to do so is studentaid.gov/PSLF. And when you get those loans forgiven, I'd love to hear those stories, share them with us because you are the best messengers to help encourage more in our community to be taking advantage of that huge benefit. And I would also mention, I think there are some really fantastic programs to support our immigrant students that are taking place within the Department of Education, whether it's our Office of Civil Rights that has been providing a lot of guidance to districts and to educators in support of immigrant students. They have a lot of resources and guides on their section of the website. Our Office of Career and Technical Adult Education has been doing some really interesting work, especially around this naturalization interagency work group that we're a part of, to help bolster the capacity of community colleges and other educators to provide citizenship classes and civics classes so that we can boost the number of not just Latinos, but other immigrants that are eligible to pursue citizenship and actually doing so. Our Office of Migrant Education, I would also mention as well, one of the things that they've mentioned that I think would be great for you all to be helpful with is, we know that during the pandemic, a lot of migrant students and their families have had to move, even more so perhaps than in the past and in the nature of their work. And so we want to make sure that they're enrolling in schools, that schools are properly enrolling them and reporting them, because their enrollment also means that they're able to tap special benefits and dollars. And if our students aren't getting tracked and reported into the school systems and through the states, that means that they're missing out on potentially federal dollars that could be used in support of their student services. We're actually going to be working with our Office of Migrant Education to do a webinar for Cesar Chavez Day on March 31st, uplifting how a number of federal agencies are doing their part to support migrant youth. And I mentioned it earlier, but there are a lot of different grants and programs that the Department of Education applies or has available. I'd encourage those of you that are educators, especially faculty, to join us in applying to be grant reviewers, peer reviewers. and really help us share the word on scholarships and programs that are funded through the department and that are available. We were meeting recently, for example, with our staff with the McNair program. It's a federally funded program that's designed to prepare undergraduate students for doctoral studies, especially those that may be first gen or from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds. And we need more Latinos to be applying for those programs. So I share a lot of this information in the hopes that you all as community leaders will help us spread the word. I know that's a lot of information, so I would also invite you to join our Hispanic Initiative newsletter. We reach about 60,000 or more community leaders all around the country, and you can sign up at ed.gov/Hispanic Initiative. We're regularly sharing grants, resources, and updates that we hope you all can help us spread.
Thank you, Melody. I mean, as I always feel that when you attend one of the workshops in LULAC, you always learn so much. And of course, from wise women who are Latinas and leaders in their communities, we get to learn from one another. But I would love, I know we have, our time is almost over, but in some closing remarks, if you could please share with us some resources or some advice for the young activists and leaders that are in the audience that are interested in advocating for K-12 policies to support Latino youth. What are some consejos that you would share with them where, you know, many times many people feel very like they don't have a voice, right? But one of the things that LULAC really promotes is that all of us together, we can make a big impact in our community. So what advice, what consejo would you share with the community? And we'll start with Dr. Theresa.
Well, I guess in my higher education lens, I would ask that, you know, get involved with LULAC, right? Get involved with the higher education committee. We'll be doing working on a number of issues. We're not just faculty, we're also advocates and activists on every issue from student debt to grow your own programs, to issues related to Hispanic serving institutions. If you're in an institution of higher education, look for Latino faculty and staff. They're going to be the folks who are going to give you consejos on a day-to-day. They know where the resources are. They've been through what you're going through. They continue to experience marginalization on a daily basis, and will work overtime to support you. So look for, many universities now have what are called identity centers for students of color in those institutions to help support not just your educational growth, but we know that for many of our students, they are not your typical college student that, you know, gets to go in and they're right out of high school. They're raising their families, and they're supporting also not just their nuclear family, but their parents. They need the help. So look for those centers on campuses and institutions, and email Angela and I, Angela Valenzuela. You can email Theresa Montaño and, you know, contact LULAC for information, and we will be your source of advocacy and information as well.
Thank you, Dr. Theresa. And yes, a big shout out to Dr. Valenzuela, who was also my professor when I was at UT Austin. Next, we have Dr. Nancy.
Thank you, Montserrat. Well, I think the first thing that I need to tell the youth is read. Read about Latino history. Read about Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta. Read about the heroes in your community. Critical race theory is no joke. We are not going to be erased. And the way we can do that and fight back these ridiculous critical race theory bills is by speaking up and speaking out and learning and going into our own communities and learning about heroes and heroines from our community. For example, the first Latina judge from federal judge was from Texas, and her name is Judge Hilda Tagle. And we are trying right now to write the history in our community. You write the history. You learn about the history. Find a mentor. Write. And that advice was given to me, Montserrat, and everyone by Dr. Cynthia Orozco, and she's out at Rio Doso, and she writes a lot. Too much for me, but it's wonderful because she writes all about Latino figures. Read about LULAC, read about the advocacy, and then get involved. I don't care if it's going to your church or finding that mentor or at the university. I don't care how you do it. Go find someone. And if you feel that you can't be a part of it, keep bugging that person until they say, oh, okay, you're really serious about this. Let's get involved. Let me get you into some leadership roles, because that's what's going to happen. So go out and don't be afraid. Don't be scared, because you know what? We have a lot of people who are willing to help you in our communities. You just have to go find them.
Thank you, Nancy. Those are very wise words from our friend Nancy, Dr. Nancy Vera. Next, we have Dr. Ana Gil Garcia.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Dr. Montaño and Dr. Vera, in terms of what they said about the youth. Yeah, we definitely, we need to motivate our youth to be part of this great organization that is LULAC. So just, there are many ways that our youth could be connected. We have the youth councils, so that would allow them to advocate locally. And I think I would encourage just to contact, LULAC has a website, just to go into the youth opportunities, and they will find it there. One thing that I like to mention is that in Illinois, we have created something that is called the LULAC education chapters in higher education. So one of the things that we have noticed at the state level is the lack of young professionals, Latino young professionals in different commissions, different committees, and we are always seeing the same faces, the older generation of LULAC, just sitting at the table. And so we've been really pushing very hard about just making sure that we have this new generation of young professionals just to go into the, just making sure that they are sit at the table, in any committee at the state level. So we are creating these LULAC chapters, and that is with that purpose in mind, which is forming the new generations of LULAC leaders. Young leaders that they will be the one responsible in the future to preserve, LULAC legacy. Thank you.
Dr. Ana Gil Garcia. Next, we have Melody.
Yes, absolutely. I would close by saying que es nuestro momento. This is our moment. There are historic policies and federal dollars that our community stands to benefit from. And so I would just urge you all to know that your voice is needed. Do not second guess or undersell yourself. I think back to when I was growing up in Chula Vista in San Diego, California, and playing on the swings in my abuelita's house in San Isidro, right on the US side of the Mexican border. And I never would have imagined that one day I'd be able to say that I've worked for 2 presidents, a governor, 2 members of Congress, the nation's largest teachers union, the national Latino organizations. But there's so much opportunity for us. And so now that I've been able to live these experiences and see the difference that Latino leaders can make in our political and policy landscape, I'd really just urge all of you to join us in the federal government, whether you are at the intern level or a full-time professional. On the career side, you can apply for jobs and see what's out there. There are a lot of jobs right now, especially some that are being hired with a surge and an urgency. If you go to usajobs.gov, you can see some of these hires that are, some of them, the usual sort of hires you might see at federal agencies, but also some that might have an extra urgency because of the COVID pandemic or because of the bipartisan transportation and infrastructure bill. So there are real-time and faster hiring processes underway right now. You can apply again to become a presidential appointee at whitehouse.gov. There's a Join Us section of the website, you can take a look and apply for federal appointments, but also White House fellowships. I'd really, like I said earlier, love to work with you all and try to see how we can bring more Latino students and professionals in to work with our White House Hispanic Initiative, whether it's as interns or through that IPA, the Intergovernment Personnel Act that I mentioned. But really, I think there are so many ways for us to influence education, which we know is the great equalizer here and can really, help our community thrive personally and economically. So whether you are becoming an educator or you're an educator ally, please join our newsletter again, ed.gov/Hispanic Initiative. We're sharing a lot of information constantly as well on our social media channels on Facebook and Twitter. But thank you all for being here, for sharing your time, and I hope to see you soon at the White House Latino Economic Summits or virtually over the months to come.
This was the State of Latinos in Education, Expanding Opportunities for All. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your knowledge and for sharing your expertise with the LULAC members. Knowledge is power at the end of the day, and intentional collaboration, it's super important. Get involved, read, join your youth council, and be a civic participant. We all together can do, our granito de, nuestro granito de arena to make sure that our communities are elevated and that we're successful. Thank you all so much for participating.